give my whole family the flu shot. The doctor that came to our facility used to leave me a vial and syringes, and I gave everybody their flu shots. Daniel does a
I'm there.
Daniel Floyd chauffeur.
Yeah, did a good job. You have the new volume with you, Yaakov?
I do.
Good.
No one can see.
Hobby Herald.
Or is Bernie coming?
Hello, Yaakov. How are you? Gemar Simatova.
Mercy. Bernie.
Hello, I haven't seen you in a while. I'm in here every Tuesday. Where have you been? You've been zooming.
I've been zooming.
Yeah, I've been coming here.
Is this the 13? No.
14 we're on.
I'm 14, yeah.
Oh,
Harold's back.
14 we're on.
14, right. Who's the attorney? Oh. Yeah, how much are they? 17? 17.
I have $3 if you want.
I don't know, I didn't actually have it. Look at that, wow. It's still wet, so be careful.
And I think they've gone up in price, but they're honoring our price to us.
Yeah, I think Amazon has them for like 30 or.
We're getting
Expensive.
a good deal on it because they're shipping it to us at the old price, and they're happy to do so. So it's a good thing. Hi, everybody.
Bye.
hi, Ernie.
Okay, volume 14, The Lamb Family of Melbourne. I know Danny Lamb, he's a character. He's been the head of Mizrahi in Canada for many, many years.
Not Canada, Australia.
I'm sorry, Australia.
Okay, small but significant difference, also part of the
It's the
Commonwealth.
British Commonwealth, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, but he's a very nice fella. Extremely nice.
Page 21, volume 14. In volume 13, we learned halachos of Netilas Yadayim before eating bread, as well as the halachos related to Hamotzi and Pasa Babi Kisnin, which was a very complicated sugya. Very interesting that there's another competing halacha series called Smichas Chaver. No, there is, some of the younger guys, Rabbi Steinmetz at Eula, I think, has a program. I think Seth Berkowitz at Yik. It's different. It doesn't cover all of Shulchan Aruch. It goes more in depth on certain sugyas. But they were dealing with the same issue of a Pasa Babi Kisnet. And so my son-in-law, Josh, was learning it. And so they had the same complexities that we had with all the various shittas that we learned. It's very interesting. So in this volume, we will continue studying halachos related to a bread meal, followed by the halachos of other types of bracha rishona, brachos recited before you eat something, and bracha achrona. As has been noted in previous volumes, the sequence of Tzorba Rabbanan follows the order of the Shulchan Aruch. In this case, the Shulchan Aruch.
Hold on a second. Ernie, did we finish 3. We were on 14 before. Did we finish? 3?
13.
I mean 13.
We finished 13.
I don't
Didn't we?
No,
Didn't we finish
There
13?
might have been one, 2 pages. at the
no.
end.
There's one thing that you left out.
Okay, hang on. Let me. 1 second. Thank you, Walter.
Short version.
Yaakov, you got to speak up. I don't know.
I only have this one. I'm not at home, so this is the only one I got. It's
We were on
14.
14 before the laws of Brochas, I think. That's where we were, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
I
Bernie,
thought he finished, but okay.
did we finish?
The rest is very shovelable.
Ernie, you're muted. Bernie, you muted. Did we finish? Or I make a mistake?
Went to go get 13.
Yes, I think we finished. We went to the last page.
I think so.
Last week. Were you there last week? Walter?
Yeah, I was, but we got to the last page. Okay, it's my mistake.
Mhm.
Tell him not to. Ernie, it's my mistake.
What was that?
It's my mistake.
Let me see. No, we did pasta noodle and kugels, right? Yeah, we talked about repurposed bread, the matzah brie, and we talked about noodles and baking it after like lasagna. No, we finished it.
Okay, we finished. My mistake. Sorry.
We finished it. It's okay. It's always good to be to chazer, especially that sivya is
My
difficult.
mistake.
I'm reading the footnote here. So in this case, the Shulchan Aruch discusses the halachas of a meal with bread first, which includes Netilas Yadayim, Amotzi, Pasababa Kisnin, sometimes treated like bread if you eat enough of it. Mayim Achronim, Zimun, and Birchas Hamazon, followed by the halachas of Bracha Rishon and Bracha Achron. And therefore, our Surah have been organized in a similar order. This first shiur focuses on when, if ever, a Bracha Rishona is recited during the course of a meal with bread, and when it must be recited the second time while eating without bread. So, is a bracha ever recited on food served during the meal? It is well known that when reciting the bracha of Hamotzi on bread, one need not recite a bracha on other foods eaten during the meal. Are there any foods that nonetheless require a bracha during a meal? As we will see in this section, there are in fact certain types of food that do require a bracha, even when eaten during a meal with bread. The Gemara in Brachos discusses which foods may be included within this category. So this is Brachos Mem Aleph Amid Beis. Amar Rav Papa Hilchasa Dvorim Aboy Machbas Asuda B'toch Asuda Ein Tu'unin Bracha Lo Lifnei V'Lachret. Foods that are brought within the meal for the purpose of the meal itself, so then they're covered by the Hamotzi bracha. Now, if they're brought for something else, like dessert, for example, Shalom Machbas Asuda B'toch Asuda, Tu'unin Bracha Lifneim, they need a new bracha in front of them, but Ein Tu'unin Bracha Lachret. Now, if after you finish the meal, they bring you something, la'achra suda tu'unin bracha bein lifnei bein lachret. Meaning, if you finished your meal, and l'chora you benched, and then you want to eat something else, then of course you'll have to make a new bracha rishon and a bracha achrona. According to Rav Papa, foods eaten as an important part of a bread meal do not require a bracha. The Rishonim disagree as to which foods are included in this category. Rashi maintains that only foods eaten together with bread are considered part of the meal. Based on this, foods such as hot cereal that are eaten to sate one's appetite, but are not eaten together with bread, require a separate bracha during the meal. Says Rashi here, What is an example of Dvar Maboy Machmas Asuda? Lelafis Behenes Apas. For example, hummus, where you're going to dip your bread into it. So that doesn't require another bracha because that is something that's brought for the bread. But hot cereal, you're not going to dip your bread into hot cereal. It's a different thing. That's how Rashi learns. That it's only things that come to Melafes the Pas that are covered by the Amos. Tosfos and other Rishonim argue, in their opinions, the foods referred to include any foods that constitute a primary part of the meal, even if they're not eaten with bread. You don't eat potato kugel with bread necessarily. I mean, they're both starches, they're both, but based on the way Rashi might make you make another bracha on that. But Tosfos says that comes as part of the meal. Pirish Ri, Dvar Maboy Machmas Asuda B'toch Asuda, Kloimar, Haragilim Lavo Machmas Asuda, that which is served with the meal. The pas, Haragilim Lachlan Imapas, Kigon Basar, the dogim, meat, fish, Chomine Kedera, stews, cooked foods, the Vian B'toch Asuda, that were brought in the meal. So, Ein Tu'unin Bracha Lifnei Malachreim. They don't need a special bracha. Afilu Achlam B'toch Asuda B'fnei Atzron Below Pas. You ate your bread an hour ago. Your meal has lasted now 2 hours. You're eating potato kugel or pasta. You're not eating it with bread, but this Tosfos is saying you're not eating with bread. It doesn't make a difference. The food that you're eating now is brought as part of the main meal. The kiven de mishum pasem boyim. That means the bread starts the Suda, and then all these other things are brought in the Suda, then they're covered. Apas poitraso. Aval dvorim shein darka level betoch Suda. But things that are not part of the main meal. Kigon tmorim virimonim, fruit. They bring you dessert, dates, pomegranates, charcoal pears. Shein megilim lafis bahenes apas. That's clearly sort of the end of the meal. It's kinuach suda. The word kinuach suda is usually referred to as dessert, but the word kinuach means to clean your mouth. It's like kinuach means to clean, a cleanser. That's really what the word kinuach means. Tu'unin bracha lifneim. The kiven de lav mishum liften osa. They did not come as any part of the bread. Ein apas petrasa. And as we know, because we know that you have to make a boire priya eitz, for example, just Rosh Hashanah night, right after Amotzi, when you brought the fruit, you made boire priya eitz, because on a fruit, it's not something that comes with the suda or with the bread. It needs its own bracha. So the Shulchan Aruch follows Tosfos, not Rashi. Dvarim aboim b'toch hasuda, maya dvarim aboim machmas hasuda, dainu dvarim shederech likvo hasuda leim lafis ben sapas. If you would make your meal on this, kigon basar, dogim, beitzim, eggs, yerokos, vegetables, gvina, cheese, daisa, that's that oatmeal. Daisa is like cream of wheat. Mine meluchim, salted fish. Afilu ochelchem below pas, even if you ate it without bread. Ein tunin bracha lifneim. The birchas hamotzi patrasim v'lo lachreim. The birchas hamozon patrasim. You don't need a separate bracha afterwards because the birchas hamozon takes care of it. The imam dvarma aboim shalom machmas hasuda. If they're coming not for the main suda, the hainu shein derech likbo hasuda aleim lafis ben sapas kigon te'enim, figs, anovim, grapes, chomine peros. Imochelotam below pas. If you eat them without bread, tu'unim bracha lifneim the birchas hamotzi and potrosa. The lav mikra suda, they're not part of the suda. Veinon tu'unim bracha lachrem. They don't need a special bracha afterwards. The kiven shabal b'toch hasuda birchas hamazon potrosa. So you get the birchas hamazon will cover the final bracha. According to Shulchan Aruch, then also yes.
Yeah, that's when you go to when the wedding, some of the weddings, they have that table with all the different fruits and the nuts and everything else. They have a separate table with that. So now let's say if you washed and you went to eat that,
You'd have to make a bar parade, like in a chanami.
and but you would have to make on every different thing there a bracha. But maybe the Persian holds that that's part of the Suda, that's part of the wedding. So if you washed on bread, maybe they wouldn't. I don't know what kind of a minhag it is. But you see it by
We
all
would
the
have to
Persian
make, we would have to make bircha saperos, we certainly would have to make.
make.
Most of
Ernie,
the
can
things
I
there
just-
are, most of the things there are fruit.
Can I just comment that there are the habits of eating has changed over the centuries. I mean, today having little pieces of fruit in salads as part of a meal is standard. You one thing to take yogurt and mix it in fruit with it. I mean, those are.
I would agree with Bernie. I think maybe fruits in salad, where you are eating it with bread, that would be covered by the bread. Small.
Sometimes you have nuts. You have nuts in salads also. Besides the fruit, you have something else.
Yeah.
So
I think you could make an argument that would be pottered by the bread, because the salad is definitely lafis benes apas. It's lafis benes apas. I eat my salads with bread. I don't care what's in there. So, but you're talking about at the end of a meal when you bring an apple or dates or a fruit as a dessert. So that's clear. It has nothing to do with the meal. That's to conclude the meal.
But what about with during? Because sometimes the table is set up and it stays set up the whole time, right from the beginning. With fruits and stuff.
Well, that's what Walter just said. And he says at a Persian wedding, when they have all the, but you still don't eat that with bread. It's not part of the meal. It's meant to cleanse your palate or whatever the meaning of that is.
Yeah, but it's there. But Ernie, it's there. It's like kind of the meal for them. It's not like an equal. It's not like that's actually part of the meal for them. You have to see. I wonder what the Banish. I wonder what they.
Let's see. We're going to go through this. According to Shulchan Aruch, then all foods eaten as the main part of the meal are included within the bracha v'motzi. But foods not eaten as the main part of the meal, such as fruit, still require their own bracha. The Mishnah Berurah explains further that any food eaten to satiate does not warrant its own bracha, but is included in the amotzi recited on the bread. The daisa, this oatmeal, afshihi ava, it's thick. The enum alafis ben pas, you don't dip your pas in it. And the chelas b'fnei, it's eaten as an independent dish. For example, a person might have breakfast at the King David Hotel, and you washed, but then you get a big bowl of oatmeal, and you eat that, and that's what's going to fill you up as your meal. It's not like you're going to have a cheese sandwich as your breakfast. You're going to have the oatmeal. But the Mishnah Berurah is saying, Kivin Shabbat Lasbia Ikr Suda Vinit Felas Lapas. It's tafel to the bread. It means it's secondary to the bread. And that includes all the various cooked dishes, like I mentioned, kugels and all of that stuff is all would be covered by the amos. The Magen Avraham, right, who is the main commentator on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, writes that the exemption of foods served during the meal from the obligation to recite a bracha stems from the principle of ikar v'tafel, primary and secondary, whereby the bracha recited on a primary food exempts a secondary food. And we will have that more in detail in Shir 7. Therefore, he writes, it is reasonable that if one eats bread solely to exempt other foods from a bracha, then they would still require their own bracha. It means you know that you're going to eat other things. And therefore, you have in mind, I'm going to eat bread just to pater that. The Magen Avraham says that doesn't work. if you, in essence, they're gonna stand alone, it might need its own brach. Right? Below pas ein tunim. They ain't fallen le pas. Lachen nearly. The main chofetz lechol pas. He doesn't really want to eat a lot of bread. The oichel ma'at pas. He's only eating a little of the bread. Umavarch alav amotzi ein poiter amacholit. The other foods that then are brought, like the kugels and things, are not going to be covered. However, the Magen Avraham, the continuation, considers the other side of the issue. That since one generally fixes bread as the mainstay of one's meal, together with these other foods, perhaps here too, the bread exempts them from acquiring a bracha. The Mishnah Berurah sort of notices that the Magen Avraham was in doubt, refers to this uncertainty of the Magen Avraham, and concludes that it is preferable not to eat bread at all in that situation, and instead to recite individual brachos on other foods, except of course for Shabbos and Yom Tov, where you need lechem mishneh, right? See Aruch HaShulchan Zos bracha for an additional interpretation of the uncertainty of the Magen Avraham, and further elaboration on this issue, which often has practical implications. The Magen Avraham also discusses the common case of foods cooked together with fruit that are eaten during a meal. On one hand, we saw above that fruits generally still require their own bracha, even when eaten during a meal. On the other hand, perhaps the halach is different when they are eaten as a regular side dish. Think about an apple crisp. Well, I would say compote is a dessert, but an apple crisp, like on Thanksgiving,
Right.
or a cranberry apple crisp where they serve with the turkey. So that's this really gray area that it's eaten with the meat.
The duck à l'orange.
Duck à l'orange. Umiu beperus mevushalim be'inayu. If you're going to cook a whole fruit, afilu mabasar, even if you're going to eat it with meat, imenas chalas kviyus udas nalayu yesh safek im yivarach. If there wasn't kviyas suda on those, if you didn't fix your idea on that item, it's uncertain whether you should recite a separate bracha. A boy parades for it, and that you would rely on the amotzi. The Mishnah Berurah notes that Achronim have disputed this question. He therefore writes that one should be stringent to recite a bracha beforehand on a raw fruit. So, afilu in bishlu aperus in basar, even if you cooked the fruit with the meat, mashma mikam achronim detzarech levarach aleim, that you need to make a boyer peraetz on it. Deina peris nasin tfeilim labasar. We would not consider the fruit secondary to the meat. V'hu delo kedas achay adam shekasav ad peris tfeilim gabi abasar. You can rely on the Chay Adam, who said that if you cook fruits with meat, it's considered secondary to the meat. Achein b'sefer Yad HaKtonim Matzasi, shematzani gam kein lomar delo yavarch ela de. And he also brought somebody else that says you shouldn't make another bracha. Ela de kosav tamacher b'zeh. He gave another reason. Tehechel de mavashal aperus in basar, or im shumanu dvash, where you cook the fruit with meat, or with fat, or in honey. V'osem mehen tapshil. Shekorin apfel tzimis, right? Tzimis, cooked carrots, or apfel tzimis. Omeagasim shekorin barin, pears. Nirin shekol ikorin barim lamazon l'suda. These things are part of the real meal. V'lo kinuach, not for dessert. Ela b'toras tafshil, being brought as a cooked meal in part of the main meal. Kishar tafshil and shnasi milefes fiyak, like other dips and vegetables. She'ein tzarich levarach alei mitam zeh. U'mesayim delatzesi de sofek kishvot zelech l'tzimis mi peris mevushalim. You want to eat this, that's carrots, cooked carrots or cooked fruit like this. Yikach tchila eze pri chai. take a whole apple. V'yivarch alea bore pre'etz, lo hotzi et zeh. V'mein lo pricha yochel tchila v'sof im hapas. If he doesn't have the raw fruit, then you just rely on the amotzi. See the Shulchan Aruch, where the Shulchan Aruch suggests eating fruit earlier in the meal and later in the meal together with bread as a manner of exempting the fruit with the amotzi, even if one eats it separate from the bread in between. However, the Bir Halacha writes tentatively that nowadays, when dishes such as tzimis have become very common, one may not need to recite a bracha first over a raw fruit. To go into Einim, Ayin Sham Be'emek Bracha, Hatam, the Hoil She'ein Regilim Level Ikra Suda, Mikri Gamkein, Shalomach Masasuda. Normally, figs are not brought as part of the meal. But in countries that have a lot of fruit, and people are cooking fruits all the time to satiate yourself as part of the meal. He says you can rely on the amotzi and not make a special brach. And the Piskei Teshuvos rules on this and brings some examples. We see many side dishes, ka'ores, rice, kubiyot gezer, cubed carrots, tapuach adama, potatoes, shlemavashim osam yachad imine peros, and they're cooked together with plums, dates, raisins, pineapple. Ein kal chiyuv bracha peresim. So there's our answer. I would think. So the question is, and when you chop up apples into a salad, does that fall into the same thing, or no? Because here they're cooked together, so it becomes a tafshil. But today we don't. The like Bernie said, the type of eating is different, and since it's coming to fill our stomach, it probably has the same din. Reciting on a bracha on a first course or dessert. Must one recite a separate bracha on fruit or vegetables eaten as a first course? Right? People used to bring, like instead of little meatballs or chicken fricassee or whatever, they would bring some kind of fruit dish as a first course, as a start, or dessert.
Isn't that what salad is? And you eat salad, it's first course. Vegetables.
Correct. Okay. According to what we have seen, it would seem that one should indeed recite a bracha, even if the fruit is cooked. And Rav Eliezer Melamed, in the Pnei Halacha, reached the same thing. Why? Because the first course is like a separate, it's not really eaten with the bread. It's a separate, it's not part of the main meal. Is that the svara, Yaakov?
Mention amotzi before you read the side.
Could be.
Included.
Let's see what he says. Fruits and vegetables that are eaten with foods that are meant to fill you up, whether they're raw or cooked. Brachas amotzi patrasa. The bracha amotzi covers them. Uvechlal zeh shezifim, prunes, shemuvushalim im habasar, tzimukim bo'arez, raisins and rice, tavshil matok shel shezifim umishamshim, tzimis, right? A sweet dish of prunes and apricots, salat gezer, carrot salad, Waldorf salad, shemagishim imamanot, shenaduli svia. These things are served with the main course. Aval im higishu salat gezer matok. But then, let's say they served a sweet carrot salad. Or salad valdorf la'akar for dessert. Tzrichim mevarach aleim bracha rishona, they have to make a boyer praise. V'chein al kompot. Applesauce. Hainu peros mevusholim b'sukkar, right? Fruit cooked in sugar. Shemagitzim b'sof mevarachim bracha rishona. What he's saying is, even though it's cooked, before we just came up with a kula, he said if you cook these fruits and vegetables with meat, then you don't have to make a separate bracha. So what the Pnei Halacha is trying to say here, just because you cooked it, it's if you served it at the end of the meal and it's sweet and it's for dessert, you need a special bracha. Now comes the complicated issue. Kasher magishim b'tchilat asuda ashkolit o melon. This was many years ago. You used to get a grapefruit. The first course, grapefruit with a little sugar, sliced into the pieces. Or a half a melon with cottage cheese in the middle of it. Or without the cottage cheese. Even if it's brought at the beginning of the meal. It's a dessert. It's just served at the start. It sort of opens up the meal with a good taste. It's not really part of the main meal. But things that are brought in the initial course to increase your appetite, kidugmat, minei chamutzim, pickles. I think salad is in that group. I think salad is meant to get you flowing and to open up your.
Ernie, Bernie actually brings a great point. The way people eat today versus years back. I mean, an appetizer is not part of the main meal. Many people just have appetizers, and it could be anything. It could be a meat appetizer, but that's not part of the main meal for the same reason that you may argue that the fruits, it seems like we took the fruits as dessert and we're focused on the fruits. And because we put them in front, now we're still focused on the fruits but people eat today fruits as an appetizer, just like some people might have meatballs as an appetizer. Why are we focused on the fruits if it's before the main meal, as opposed to something that's not the main meal?
Well, would you agree that the fruit is not part of the main meal?
Well, as an appetizer, I would agree that meatballs as an appetizer isn't part of the main meal.
But meatballs don't require a different bracha.
Yeah, but
A shahakol,
I know, but you've made
a motzi, right? So, but why doesn't that apply?
No, because meatballs is lalafes apas. That's the standard. Lalafes apas means that which you dip your bread in, that which you eat your bread with.
So the standard is malafes apas, or is it part of the meal?
No.
Or is that one and the same?
How you define what the main meal is connected to the lalafes apas.
Okay.
Why don't you ask the balabosta in the house how she defines the main meal? She gives you something to start. She's going to say it's part of the main meal.
Right. So
it's served on a different plate.
Yeah, it's served on a small plate. You have many plates. You have many plates on your. You have a salad plate. You have a first plate,
Fish plate,
a Vorspeise. But what does that mean? Does that mean it's not the meal? Of course, it's the meal. The wife, she made that as part of the meal. Dessert, I understand. Sometimes dessert, afterwards, people don't eat the dessert or they don't want to have fruit. That's a dessert. It's maybe a separate thing. But at the beginning of the meal, when people are hungry, and they want to eat that, they went to wash, they had a piece of bread. They're going to eat that. That's their meal.
Okay, so Rav, the Pnei Halacha says that if you serve melon or grapefruit as your starter, you would need to make a boyer praise. Because he says it's a sug shel kinuach shemugash betchilas suda kedei liftoach as suda b'tam tov ve'enam chelek mamashi shel suda. That's what the Pnei Halacha says. You can
I'm
argue.
not going to argue with the Pnei Halacha. Don't worry.
Right. I think it makes
I'll
some.
make the brocha.
Now, the issue, now, look in the footnote. If one's purpose in serving fruit is more as an appetizer, meaning to give more of an appetite for the rest of the meal, then the halacha is subject to dispute among poskim, whether to recite a bracha. According to some opinions, one should not recite a bracha, due to the principle of suffix brachas lahakia. If one wishes to use the fruit course for the purpose of satiation to fill the person up, one need not recite a bracha on them if they're eaten together with bread. So some of it has to do with the intent of the balabas. But like today, pickles, olives, my wife has that on the table with the motzi. Pickles, olives, dips, all that. That's clearly goes along with the amotzi, doesn't require another bracha. Must one recite a bracha when eating other desserts at the end of a meal, such as ice cream, sorbet, or ices? The Shevet HaLevi rules that assuming it is eaten as dessert, one indeed recites a bracha over it. And other Ashkenazi poskim rule this way as well. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Elyashiv, Rav Chaim Scheinberg. Near Demima take a kon glida, chocolate, pshita de indinam kemashkin. They're not like fluid, but tzarich levar malech lifneim v'harbe toim b'zeh. Many people err, you'd have to make a shackle. The Or L'Tzion distinguishes between ice cream, which is considered food, and other frozen foods or popsicles made of fruit, which he maintains has the status of a drink and are always covered by the amotzi. Nira shaglida chalavit dina ka'ochel. So dairy ice cream is food. The kivin shabali kinuach, it's coming as dessert, it's not part of the main meal. Mevarchim aleh. You have to make its own separate bracha. The motzi doesn't pater it. Abal shar glidot, other ices, sha'asuyit b'mashkim acherim, that are made from other fluids that are frozen. Dinam kamashke ve'mevarchim aleim. Sheyesh limod din ze medivrei Rambam, perak tes milchos tumas oichlin, hashemen o advash shenitmu. You have oil or honey that became tameh. V'achakach karshu, that became coagulated. V'achakach nimucha, and then melted. Harei and rishon l'tum aloilam. They remain primary tumah, they don't lose it. V'nei shein kemashkin, v'afal pisha kafu, achar shenitmu, even though it was frozen or gotten hard, doesn't change their status. So he argues it's because you freeze it, it's really still a liquid. The Yalkut Yosef rules that one should not recite a bracha on ice cream or any other frozen desserts eaten at the end of the meal. This is Rav Ovadia. However, he recommends not eating it during the meal to avoid any questions. Rather, first recite Birchas Hamazon and then recite a separate bracha on it. He says, don't eat it. Leave it until after benching. Vaz yivorach birchas shahakol on the ice cream. Vein evdel bezeh ben glida b'taruvas cholav. Makes no difference whether it's milachik or parv. Leglida shem b'taruvas chavim b'chozos ochel maglida b'sof hasuda lo yivarach. He says if you can end up eating it even within the suda before benching, don't make a bracha. Could you pass me that? What is the halacha when one eats cake or cookies for dessert? Should one recite another bracha rishona? The Vizosa Bracha addresses this question and writes that since most cakes and cookies qualify as pasababi kisnin, the category of mizonos food similar to bread, one does not recite a bracha on them during a bread meal. Rov suge ha'ugot ha'nechalot b'toch hasuda. most of cookies and cakes eaten at the end of a meal, within a meal, ein levarach aleim. Shema yesh lu din shel patz gomer. Number one, as we learned for the last few weeks, it might be complete bread. V'niftaras berachas hamotzi, and therefore the hamotzi covered it. Yesh shekatzu kima'achar shaptur mibrocha la'uga u'machmas safek. Some want to say, yeah, but the only reason that we have the exemption of the bracha is because it's a safek. Tov v'chatchila limana v'lachol uga kazu. She's safek pas b'toch hasuda. Some say don't eat it at all. But v'yesha atzu la'ach la'achar birchas hamazon v'varach bracha l'fanei la'achar. Some advise, i.e. the Or L'Tzion, to eat cake after benching. You should have in mind when you make the hamotzi that it's going to cover the cake. Page 28. Leaving in the middle of the meal.
30.
In this section, we will discuss a different question pertaining to brachos recited during a meal, known as shinu mokom. Let's say you go somewhere else, whether one who leaves in the middle of a meal and returns must recite another bracha. The Gemara Masechta Pesachim discusses this question and concludes that one must indeed recite a new bracha, but the Amoraim dispute in which case this halacha applies. This is Pesachim Kufalaf on the base. V'su Yosef Rav Chizv Komer Shmei Nafshe. He was sitting and learning and reciting his own name. Hada Amrit Shinu Mokum Tzarich Levarach. That which was said, that if you change your place in the middle of the Suda, you need to make another bracha. Lo Amaron was only said Ela Bidvarim She'ein Tunin Bracha Lachrein Bimkoma. Only on something that doesn't require a bracha afterwards. Avad var matunim bracha lachrein bimkomon ein tzarich levar. My timer lekiva kama hadar, because he came back to his original meal. Rav Sheshes Omar echad zev tzarich levar. He says makes no difference. Rav Chizda draws a distinction between different types of food. An item which requires a bracha achrona in the place where he ate, such as bread, does not require a bracha when he returns and wishes to eat more, since it is assumed that he did not yet intend to conclude his meal due to the need to return to his location to recite Birchas Hamazon. If one was eating food that does not require a bracha achrona in the place where he ate, such as food upon which the brachos of shahakol, ha'etz, or adom are recited, then one must recite a bracha if he returns and wishes to eat more. Or if he wants to eat in another location, he has to recite that bracha. Rav Sheshes, on the other hand, maintains then one must recite a bracha when returning and eating in both cases. In determining the halacha, the Gemara and commentaries address a number of different questions. First of all, do we follow Rav Chizda or Rav Sheshes? Number two, must one who changed places recite only a new bracha rishona when he returns? Or must he also recite a bracha achrona on the food he ate previously? Does it matter if others remain at the meal when one leaves? What is the definition of shinu makom? Leaving one's house, or even going to a different room? How broad is the category of foods that do not require a bracha in the original location? Does it also include foods from Shivas Aminim or grain? So regarding issues 1 and 2, the Rif and Rambam rule in accordance with the opinion of Rav Sheshes and state that one must always recite a bracha achrona and then another bracha rishona when leaving in the middle of the meal, and then returning to eat more even if one is eating bread. Says the Rambam, he was eating in this house, uposak sudasa, and he stopped in the middle of the meal. He went to his neighbor. Oshaya Oichel, he was eating the Karo Chaver Ladaberibo. His friend came to the door to speak to him. V'yatzalo lepesach beso. He went out of the front of his house. The chazer, and he came back. Hoil v'shina makomo. Tzarich levarach lemafreya. He has to make the birchas achrona. He has to bench amasha achal. The chazer levarach betchila motzi. He has to start again. V'achakach yigmor sudas. That's what the Rambam says. In contrast, the Rosh and Tosfos rule, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Chisda, who makes a distinction between those foods that require bracha achrona in the place one ate, and those that don't. In the former case, you do not recite a new bracha, because he had in mind he was going to come back and bench when he came back. But foods that don't require a bracha achrona, in a lot of cases, you do recite a new bracha. Furthermore, they rule that even in cases defined as changing location, that one must recite a bracha, that even in cases defined as changing location, that one must recite a bracha, one only recites a new bracha rishona, but one does not recite a bracha achrona at that time for what he already ate. Says the Rosh, the Rashbam Pasuk Rav Chisda, Mishum Netanya Kavosev Venir Kidvarav. There was a brisa like Rav Chisda. That which we said, that if you change your place, you have to make a bracha. That's not bracha achroina. Hainu bracha rishona labo. Aval bracha achroina mafreya. But on the foods that he ate before, and now you have to bench. No, ain't tzarich levan shini makom havik esach hadas. All it is changing your mind. This refers to a case where one decided he had completed his meal and declared that he was ready to recite birchas hamazon. In some cases, one who then decides to eat again must recite new bracha rishona, but he does not need to recite birchas hamazon first. He changes his mind; he can recite one birchas hamazon. The Shulchan Aruch rules, in accordance with the Rambam, that one who leaves and then comes back, so recites both a bracha achrona, he has to come back and bench. And then if he wants to eat, he has to recite a new bracha rishona, even for a meal with bread. The Ramah, on the other hand, rules with the Rosh that for a meal with bread, one need not recite either birchas hamazon or a new bracha rishona if he leaves and returns in the middle of the meal. So if you're eating and you're called outside, you come back, the Ramah says you just continue eating. Says the Shulchan Aruch. Haya oichel b'bayizeh upasak sudasa, and he got interrupted. V'holach l'bayis acher or shahaya oichel v'kar chaver l'daber imo v'yatzal l'pesach beso choizer. He was called by a neighbor to go out to the front door, and then he came back. Hoil v'shina makomo, because he changed his place. Tzarich levarach l'mafreya mashocha. He has to bench. The choizer mevarach betchila motzi, and then start again with a motzi. V'achakach yigmor sudaso. Aval im daber imo b'sach habayis. If your neighbor came into your house and you went to talk to him in the front parlor, aval pishashini makom mefana lefana ain't tzarich levarach. You went from a different room to a different room. You don't have to recite a new bracha. Says the Ramah, ayin lekamon, im hayadaitu lechol b'mokom acher. If his intent when he left was to eat in another place, lo mikri sheni mokom, v'hu sheyesh shtei makomos b'vayis. As long as both places are in his own house, it's not considered that you triggered sheni mokom. There are those who argue, of course, that's the Rosh, right? That's the Rosh and Tosfos. It's like changing your mind. He has to, If he moved to a different place, he has to recite a new bracha on what he wants to eat. But you don't have to bench on what he ate already. Avalo mashakvar achal. V'davka shelo yiniach miktzas chaverim besuda. And that's if he didn't leave anybody at the meal. And he ate things that don't require a bracha afterwards. But when he went to the front door, he left other people at the table. Even if he didn't leave people. But you're eating something that requires a new bracha achrona. He doesn't have to make any new brachas. So the Ramah summarizes. Somebody who left in the middle of his meal. Goes next door. He doesn't have to make another bracha. Eating bread requires a bracha in its place. If he took his mind off the meal, when he returns, then he does have to. If he had chadas, he has to make a new bracha of what he wants to eat. Whether he goes back to the place where he already ate, or he finished it in the breakfast room. Person shouldn't leave his place. We're concerned he's going to forget to return. He's going to eat more. But for like you're missing mincha, mutter. The Mishnah Berurah writes that according to Shulchan Aruch, even moving for a short time requires a new bracha. Afilu lo nishteh sham klal, even if he didn't stay at the other location a lot. He came back right away. Afilu achishin makam mikri, it's considered shim makam. Udu kamei, koshken imotz lig more sudos makam mashen. Certainly, if he wants to finish his meal in another place. Despite this ruling of Shulchan Aruch, many Sephardic poskim, such as the Yalkut Yosef, write that the halacha follows the opinion of the Ramah due to the principle of Safek brachos, and one should not recite a second bracha.
With these halachas, I'm really surprised they serve bread, for example, at a shmorg, at a wedding, because it's so complicated.
Shinu makam.
That and then you'll have to bench because you're going to go into another room for the meal.
But you can have it in mind. Remember, it has a chadas.
But where does it say that?
If some
as if
people
it's the
have in
same-
mind, some people, they have washing there, so you're going to be sitting at a table, so your washing is covering everything.
even though you're going to another room. After a break, because usually what you have the chasana in between.
But so when you go to a wedding, you know where you're going to eat. It's your dining room. We're talking about leaving your house. When you go to a wedding, so there's the shmorg, and then you're going to go you're going to go to a table.
But there's a break in between.
Oh, okay. So there, if you wash, you might have to bench. If what he's saying is, let's say there's the shmorg, and then there's a 2-hour break with the thing. In a chanami, you would have to bench. Absolutely, because that's a big break. That's going to be a hesach hadas, unless there are mekilim that say you should have it. You have it in mind where you're going to eat, and it's all considered one suda. I think most of the poskim are going to tell you don't wash by the shmorg because it's going to create a halachic problem, and they're going to eat and don't wash, and wash only when you go into your suda.
But that's contrary to what you said in the previous week's shiur, when you said if there is in the smorgasbord food that looks like it's wrapped with pastry dough, or then if there's a question, you wash there.
So
Right?
we had a
And you have to
suffix,
bench.
Bernie.
Yeah.
They had a suffix on those foods. So in order to get around the suffix, they advise, make a motzi on it first. So what's coming out is because of this other problem, you don't have that solution. And therefore, if you're gonna eat the, what do you call it, the hot dogs in the wrap, you better eat a lot of them, like your kovea suda, or you may not be able to eat it.
And you'll have to bench there.
Yeah, or wash, eat bread, eat the sliders with the hamburger, and then bench,
But regardless, it
then
may not
wash
be in the same,
again. There's nothing
it may not
wrong
be in the
with.
same place,
Say again?
regardless.
The bigger problem, the weddings, are the hesach hadas. I mean, it's clearly not the suit anymore. The shina makom is because you could have in mind, oh, I'm washing here, but I'm going to eat there. What about the wedding issue? So we'll see. I'm sure the post we're going to deal with all these issues. I'm going to stop here because we've covered a lot of ground. Next Tuesday night is we can learn next Tuesday. Yom Kippur's Monday. Now the Navi Shir is Motzei Shabbos. We said at 8:30. Yeah, Motzei Shabbos 8:30. The Navi Shir. Tomorrow night for the Daf Yomi the Siyum at OBKLA 6 p.m. And if I don't see everybody, have a Gemar Chasima Tova
Simatova.
and have an easy fast, everybody.
Amen.
Well,
Thank you. You will.
These are, by the way, these are